Okay, I want to thank all of you coming, especially the poets who are writing all this stuff, and especially thanking my wife Liz, whose idea this project was. And so basically, if anybody wants to talk about the photographs, I'll be here afterward. Meanwhile, Judith Merriweather with KRBS is going to be giving you the rest of the story. Adios.
And actually, the poets are going to give you the rest of the story. I'm really just here to let you know who they are, although I imagine recognizing so many faces that most of you know these poets and the artistry that they'll be bringing tonight. Having read about this reading tonight, you probably saw the word ekphrastic. It is an evening of ekphrastic poetry. Darrell Bork is much more qualified to explain that to you, but it is a relationship with a piece of art. And whether it is a vivid description of the piece of art or a relationship, a narrative of the art, helping to enhance our appreciation of that piece of art, it's a lovely dance of art and poetry that you'll hear tonight. If you could, just a reminder, hearing that noise back there, if you would turn your cell phones off, that would be really helpful for the poets this evening. The first poet to read this evening is Darrell Bork. I can't imagine anyone in here does not know Darrell or hasn't heard Darrell read at some point. Darrell Bork is the former poet laureate of Louisiana. He is also the founder of the Amédée Ardouin Project, and his latest book is Where I Waited, that was published by Yellow Flag Press, and it is a set of poems that accompanies paintings by Bill Jingles. Darrell has had a long and passionate relationship with art. He has written many ekphrastic poems in his life, and I know the ones that he will do tonight in relation to Leo Touchet's photographs will be jewels in themselves. This is Darrell Bork.
Thank you, Judith. The first poem is Eddie Delahousse, Evangeline Downs, August 1973. And it's a sort of takeoff on that particular photograph by Leo. There are a couple of three things. The first thing that I saw when I saw that particular photograph was ancient Greek art. There's a moment in art history where the statuary that's so important to a culture begins to shift. During Egyptian times and the earlier Greek times, the statues sort of stood with both feet flat on the ground. And then there was what the Italians call contrapposto, which is working against being a post. And you see it in Eddie Delahousse's stance, where the marble sculptor or the bronze sculptor allowed a more natural posture, so that there began to be that kind of movement. And you can even see a kind of culmination in that in the sculpture of Rodin, where there's all kinds of movement. And the first time I saw Cecil Borel, who's the seated figure there, I immediately thought of Rodin's The Thinker. Because if it had been a planned thing, it would have been kitsch. But it's not planned. It's Cecil Borel getting ready for a race. So the word contrapposto comes into the poem. Cecil Borel from Catahoula comes into the poem. There's a reference to flipping basins that I needed to get into the poem, because one of the things that we don't realize about these incredible men and women who work in the racing industry, which is one of Louisiana's most important industries, tourist industries, it becomes a kind of theater, and it becomes in some ways a kind of art. But in the hardware, in the jockey rooms, were these flipping basins, which were put in there for the racers to be able to gag themselves, to keep their weight down. The weight level was 126 pounds with their tack, and Cecil Borrell left the racing industry because he couldn't keep that weight. And of course, his brother Calvin Borrell went on to be a star in the racing world. Eddie Delahousse is one of the few people who have won the Preakness Stakes, the Belmont Stakes, the Kentucky Derby twice, and the first time he won was in 1982. He repeated that victory in 1983. The horse that he rode in 1982 was Gato del Sol. And Gato del Sol was owned by the Gregson Foundation. And when there's a reference in the poem to Eddie Delahousse falling in 2003 and suffering a broken neck and a spine injury that almost killed him, and he decided that he would quit racing at that particular point. This Hall of Famer was so important to the racing industry that the Gregson Foundation asked him to serve on their board. And I didn't want to read a poem about Eddie Delahousse without telling you the kind of work that he does on the Gregson board. It's to develop programs to benefit and enhance the quality of life of California thoroughbred horse racing backstretch workers, the workers who never get in the limelight, and their families. Recent past recipients have studied at UC Riverside, CSU Los Angeles, Pasadena City College, Berkeley, El Camino College, East LA Community College, and UC Davis. The organization was set up to enhance the occupations directly relating to the physical care of horses. In order to be a recipient, you had to be a groom, a walker, a comber, somebody who sat with horses, and that's what Eddie does in the life that he lives now. Eddie Delahousse, Evangeline Downs, August 1973. If we had known that afternoon the knot of who we were and why, it might have changed nearly everything, or hardly anything at all. In an ancient world, we might have caught a marble broker's eye who sees our ease in contrapposto inside the uncut stone, who sees a fall on a last ride on the other side of the well of now, sees what Cecil sees inside his hand. You see boots, silks, my furrowed brow, bridles, crop. You don't see the flipping basins, or how we learn to turn our knees slightly inward in the stretch, or how to stay inside the irons, the slop of rain-soaked tracks, or how we learn the mechanics of geometries of riding rails and forgot the maths in the cuts in the race to stay on top of who we were. You cannot see the vow to live with horses, or to lie whole nights in stalls when they needed us, or to wait for the call from the old men in bush tracks to race before we were of age. My eye is no marble broker's eye. I am 21. I do not even see Gato del Sol. And the thing that took me about the next photograph, it's called The Grandstand, Evangeline Downs, July 4th, 1973. July 4th always has the feature race, the DS Shine Young Futurity Race, which is an important part of our culture, an important race. For those, I'm sure there are about 5 people in here who don't know what a futurity is, but what you do is you place your bets on the horses sometimes as they're being bred, and then when they're 2 years old, they race, and you see what you put your money on. And that might explain both his attention to the racing form. What struck me about this photograph is how everyone is looking to the left. except he who is looking at his racing form and she who is looking at Leo. She's the only one in there that has honed in on this guy running around with a Nikon or whatever he was running around with. The Grandstand, Evangeline Downs, July 4th, 1973, in the voice of the woman in the photograph. You could not accuse me of being casual about how I look, or anything else for that matter. I shopped for days for just the right thing to wear, a front zipper, an open collar, stripes, the handbag on my arm, the ring I picked myself years ago when he asked to marry me. I permed my hair just the way I wanted it to be. I picked those cat-eye glasses. They go with everything I own. I can look right into cameras. Algorithms in me cannot be disarranged with light. All around me, others are in the tow of some present drift, something going on to my left, it seems, a fee perhaps for being ordinary or easily distracted. I know what I know, and it's not in the racing form. I hedged my bets long before I could see what I was betting on. That firm jawline you see, that's me. I bring myself into myself every day. That's me. Putting money on a mare or its foal, that's me. My husband is a slightly gentler mate, making no fuss about who he is or is not. We make the nearly perfect match.
The next poet this evening is Sandra Saar. Sandra has chosen Louisiana as her home, and she writes beautifully of this new home, but about many things as well. And she will write about some of Leo's photographs this evening. She's in the process of revising a novel right now. It's called The Road to Indigo, and she was one of a handful chosen to go to the 10-house writing workshop this summer in Portland, Oregon. It's a great honor, so congratulations on that, Sandy. Her poems have been in several journals, including Yarn and the Mocking Heart Review, and were nominated for an AWP Intro Journals project. Sandra Saar.
Thank you, Judith. Happy to see everybody here tonight. We need extra chairs. That's wonderful. I am going to read to you my first poem that relates to this image. And when I first saw this image of Leo's, what struck me was this woman's defiant gaze directly into that camera. And I wanted to stick with that idea. I wanted to explore her story without benefit of even the title of the photograph. And so the title of this poem is Siren. She was one of the best damn tassel dancers in New Orleans. What some cat called a sleazy heat seeker, a holy hell raiser, pacing the stage all glittery and shimmying, a regular hardcore harlot, according to her ne'er-do-well daddy, the backdoor cash taker. Now she chases flames, not to stoke, but to extinguish. A truck, not tassels, is the tool of her trade. No one can drive like her. Red blaze of speed, light flash, and siren wail, she owns the driver's seat. Watches both ways, horn blaring and warning, get out of my way. The town men, they're still chasing her fire truck. Some nights, in silence, she hears one man's old code knock on her door. He meets her in dreams. Those nights she awakens with a trace of a smile and lights a lucky strike. And when I first saw this image, the poets here tonight were given the opportunity to choose which images we would like to respond to and write a poem about. And what struck me about this image was something that was broken into no longer whole. And so the title of this poem is Blue Note. Tuba man taps his brass, split in half notes, tucked in pockets. A sweat rag, time slides through years on his river walk, where he runs mind scales in sharps and flats toward home. He counts goodbye beats, feels the pulse of streets, old tunes made new by feet that pound out half-note, whole heart, juice of life. He knows her note by heart, cursive, bled blue, mood indigo. Tuba man pauses and reassembles the parts. He blows a holy breath through the bellows and hollows, so it flows through the coils and pistons and valves, sending up a let the good times roll blare, so she can hear the color of wholeness.
Don't you just want to say more, more, more? You don't want them to leave. You can get some more of their work over at that table there. Some of their books of poetry are for sale there, so you can take some of that poignant beauty and humor home with you when you leave. The next reader this evening is Patrice Melnick, who has probably single-handedly done more to help encourage writers in this community than anyone else. She makes Grand Coteau, Louisiana her home, and she is the founder of the Festival of Words, which is a literary rural arts organization in Grand Coteau and really focuses on South St. Landry Parish. Patrice writes essays and poetry about her travels and home, and we look forward to what you have to say about Leo's photos.
Thank you. I'm honored to read with all these wonderful poets and to respond to these beautiful photos. And I was immediately drawn to this one because I used to live in New Orleans and would follow the second line parades, and my friends did, and so I tried to find a point of entry from my own memory. This is called Matthew. When the second line funeral parade came pulsing down St. Anne Street between leaning Creole cottages with the always open shutters and warm stoops that bordered the steps, when the second line parade worked its way down the road, umbrellas twirled open and dancers high-stepped, uncrossing legs, you sprung out the door. Bottle of whiskey in one hand, the other hand holding air as you leapt into the middle of the throbbing cluster of light-stepping mourners. Your white freckled face and orange hair flashed from in the middle of that pack of black-suited dancers, and you caught the rhythm in your thin body. Once, after hearing that you had stopped eating, depressed and drunk in that apartment, I went and picked you up in my truck, brought you to my house for spaghetti. For 2 days, we talked and walked the streets at all hours, and I naively thought I could keep you from the drinks, but you soon broke into the bottles I didn't remember I even had, liquor that lined dark cupboards. Finally, I agreed to bring you back home. Years later, you moved to Galveston to be near ocean, sand, heat. When you called often to tell me all was well, I knew you were between jobs, between boyfriends, and alcohol slurred your words. Sometimes I heard nothing and knew you were busy, waiting tables, partying in some man's safe in some man's private home. When did life become too heavy? Frustration of never satisfied body, a heart never whole. You had to prove what you always believed. Let your unlovable self fall into the forever sleep. They threw your ashes into the ocean. Dust danced in the rhythm of the winds, in the musical rush of the waves, your spirit still stepping and jazzing upon the salty breeze. And this photograph I was drawn to because the reflections and the geometry of the city, and then you had this young person running, and I was just intrigued by by both the movement and the stillness of it. And I titled this poem, Reasons to Run. In this city of black and white, a downtown cafe waiter serves your coffee hot. Your mom berates you from inside your head, and the TV, bolted high on the wall, runs political news constantly, bloated stories that are only palatable late at night from smart-mouthed comedians. Clouds rise to the surface of your cup. Get it to go. On a gray, shaded day like this, sometimes the bus is late, sometimes early. Everyone misses it from time to time. Feel your body lean against the hard lines of the plexiglass bus shelter, surrounded by reflections of the geometric cityscape and too many no-turn signs. Feel your knees bend as you turn your sneakers, crease, and legs begin to pump, and balls of your feet pound the pavement. Send your body into a lean fear run. Maybe this is a run-of-the-mill story. Is this a running joke? Will you flee the skyscraper horizon for a run-down country town where gray tones take on the color of your clouded dreams? Thank you.
Well, these poems make you want to just linger longer in front of all of these photographs. That's the beauty of ekphrastic poetry. The next reader is Sydney Crean, who is herself an award-winning visual artist, in addition to being a poet. And so she's on both sides of this ekphrastic relationship here. She practices psychology of Carl Jung, and she has a book of poetry entitled Sweet Threads of Memory, inspired by Louisiana sugarcane fields.
I'd like to echo the gratitude for being a part of this and for what I'm already hearing and feeling. I have been a student of Daryl's, and one of the things he has said many times after a poem, where did the poet have to go to get that? And I've thought of it about maybe 50 times since I've been here. I chose this remarkable photograph to me. It says so much. And it was a time period that I experienced, my husband and I both experienced, and wearing clothes a lot like that too. Not to mention the hair. Okay. We can't hear you. Okay. How about that? Is that better? More? Okay. Thank you. Let me know, because I do have a softer voice. A bride, a groom, a cow. We know they are just married. His brand new golden circle symbol wraps his left ring finger. Eternity on a hand. They each grasp the young cow's bridle. She stands in calmness between them. This tells us she is tame, used to people. It's probably her first wedding. And maybe her first photograph. We can't be sure. If you study her eyes, the cow's, not the bride's, you may apprehend another eternity, quiet, universal gaze, one sense antiquity, bovine to human. Her eyes say, I am your liege, I serve you, give your infants their start. You ride me, herd me, corral me, brand me, even eat me. I am domestic, not unlike a once wild orchid, now in a dining room, no longer in her jungle paradise. The bride, too, enters a domestication on her wedding day. Her vows full of innocence. I will obey you, my new husband. But that's another story. The gentle outdoor wedding filled with the erupting 70s emblem, macrame. Macrame. Her gown, of hand-tied knots of cord and yarn, make a pliable material that breathes, lets breezes in and out, allows nature room to embrace her. In return, she embraces nature before our eyes. Sturdy chin, demure sense of self, the long, slick, straight black hair. Her left arm rests over the cow's shoulder. America was suffering a chasm, splitting apart at the sidewalks, the front porches, state fairs, active fault lines down our middle, out our edges. Berkeley, New York, Chicago, Kent State University. It was a Vietnam War, or as it is called in Vietnam, the American War. But an ever-joyous, moss, resurrection firm, oak-laden Abbeville, Louisiana, cows are invited to attend weddings. Perhaps they receive their invitations in pastures. Who knows? It is Louisiana. Maybe kick up the dust under hooves in the rollick rhythm to Las Palapatat. This is not a fatted cow ripe for the sacrifice, no. She is their friend, a witness of shared love, patience, and I'll say it, quixotic nuance, inclusive, humorous. And who cares if a cow goes to a wedding? Let it be, as the Beatles taught us to do back then. In times of trouble, Mother Mary came to them, and she still comes to us, saying words of wisdom. Let it be. The second photograph really touched my soul and heart. I started out as a teacher of young children. Many children of itinerant farmers that would come into different places in California to pick grapes and other fruit. And they did not speak English. And somehow I talked to them, and they started talking more and more English, and asked me to be an English language stimulator for the county, and I couldn't even speak Spanish. So somehow we crossed that bridge and loved each other. So this reminded me of some of those little 5-year-old faces. Learning, Honduras, 1968. We think the islands that lay in the distance may hold an answer, a better answer than the dust as it rises on the windy days from the flower beds replete with blast of hot hues announcing a new season's vibrancy. In your mother's garden, young blossoms seem to wear bonnets ruffled and crowns that shine. Some lilt to shade, others lift to breezes that dazzle, then quiet. We do not know how old the 2 boys are, possibly 8, possibly 9. We do not know if the boys are brothers, cousins, friends. We do know they are classmates. They sit familiar on a bench behind a table, being used as a desk in a room of rough-hewn wood, and nothing is painted. The room is their school. You, in tattered pants, torn at the knee, unwashed, we know you live in poverty. The other boy, bright eyes, bright shirt ironed, pencil in hand, an anticipant tongue tip poised at your lip. You in the rags lean over him to see writing, to see what has been written on his tablet. Your face, your relaxed, inquisitive face is searching. It wants to know. It wants to know how and what. You want to learn. You want an answer, my boy. We are lonely most of our lives. What if we've been waiting on an island for a better answer? Its boundary consistent in sinking deeper at island's wet edge. Let us go pick a bouquet of flowers, the ones with seed pearls and small lizards. Let our hands open to dust as we would to a new book, page by page, until its spine yields to flexible, and the answer is read without a search at all. Thank you.
The next reader is Elizabeth Burke, and I know that she's already been thanked, but I think we, having experienced it this far, would like to thank her again for the vision for this program this evening. Elizabeth is a psychologist and another person who has fallen in love with Louisiana in so many ways and has made Louisiana her home. She has 2 chapbooks that have been published by Yellow Flag Press, Learning to Love Louisiana and Louisiana Purchase, and her other poems have been widely published in journals and anthologies around the country. Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
So originally, this poem was called Catalonia, 1973, and that is the northernmost province of Spain, always and forever striving for its independence. But after talking to the photographer, another title came to mind. I didn't actually choose that one. I sort of did, but I asked him at one point which is his favorite photograph of all, And he said, the old man sitting in a chair in the corner. I thought, okay, that must make a great story. Let's hear that story. I said, why? He said, because it has black, white, and every shade of gray. That's the difference between a word person and an image person. Black, white, and every shade of gray. Although the old man is reading, his shadow hand holds a gun. His cane propped against a companion chair, he saves for his wife, who was killed 30 years ago during the Spanish Civil War. His long fingers obscure the title. Impossible to tell if he's holding a pamphlet of pro-Franco propaganda, a piece of illustrated erotica, or a manifesto on Catalan independence. He reminds me of my father, an armchair activist who sat nightly under a map of the Soviet Union he had taped to our cracked, peeling walls, dozing over Marxist tomes, copies of the Daily Worker, urging workers of the world to unite, waking to extol Stalin's massacres for the sake of the cause. Always the cause. The old man, too, dozes. His dreams mingle with memories. The red dress his wife wore to rallies, their fevered talks into the night, ending in passionate embraces. The speeches, screaming crowds, the blood-stained streets, the infighting between factions on the same side. So violent that the fight for freedom against fascism collapsed under the weight of its own divided dogmas. Sometimes the old man wonders if it matters anymore what side they were fighting for. Time is the enemy now. He still misses his wife and his son, now Franco's political prisoner, in the building where he keeps a lonely vigil. But the old man, too, is a prisoner of his own shadows. Only his books, his memories, to shield him from seeing the pillars of divided light rising behind his back, one white wall, one black, while outside the picture frame, his dog lies on the gray concrete beneath them both, each waiting for the other to lead the way home. Some things never change, or as the French say, le plus ça change, le plus c'est la même chose. Now, I've been warned not to talk politics in Louisiana, so that's all I'm going to say about that. And on a lighter note, this poem, the next poem, is called Line Dance. It caught my attention because ever since I've been down here, I've been trying to learn how to line dance. We may not be the Rockettes, but baby, we can still boogie. I remember the first time I saw those silky legs on stage swing out in a straight line like grandma's knickers hanging on a clothesline, swaying in a hot breeze. Mother enrolled me at an early age in ballet school, hoping for balance and poise, although I preferred the freewheeling clatter of tap. I wanted to dance like a showgirl, all glamour and style, sassy butts bouncing back and forth, our steps in perfect unison, so our bodies looked like one big wave undulating across the stage. And backstage, I wanted red roses, roving eyes to idolize my perfect legs, lips, hips. Alas, knobby knees, weak ankles, and toes like cheese doodles hanging off the edge of a cliff prevented a dance career. So my life took a different turn. My husband, a dour man, refused to dance. So when I was alone, I pirouetted on my suburban parquet floors, broom in one hand, dustpan in the other, twisted to chubby while I dried dishes, shouted out loud with Ray Charles, and when James Brown came on, Mama swung her brand new bag around the room like a lantern in the arc of a shooting star. It's my time now to dance in a line, to swing and sway in perfect time. We may not be the Rockettes, but we can still boogie to rock and roll, swamp pop, and cowgirl rhythm and blues.
The final reader tonight is Gennaro Keeley Smith. He's a professor of creative writing at La Tech, Louisiana Tech University up in Ruston, Louisiana. He has 2 books of poetry published by the UL Press, and those are The Land South of the Clouds and The Land Barren Sun. And again, a reminder, both of those and many of the other books that I've mentioned are for sale over there for the poets. He's also involved with 2 manuscripts that are just about finished, Portraits of Our Father Drinking and The Beautiful Ones Are Not Yet Born, which are a collection of short stories. Gennaro Keeley Smith.
Good evening. I'm going to start off with this one, Calumet Landing, Louisiana, 1968. Can you hear me back there? Okay. These women just received news that all 21 men in the salt mine died. Okay. And there was an explosion 3,000 feet underground, and the men were at the 1,200 feet level from the surface, so they, of course, never made it out. This is called Limbo, and it's written in 4 parts. Our wives and would-be wives wait with worry, wondering what news will come from rescuers working air into the mine's man-made mouth, made silent from salt, monoxide, and prayer. The women were awakened at 11 to phone calls and knocks at the doors, to news of an explosion 3,000 feet underground. The blaze engulfed the rafters. The beams crackled and crippled to kindling, collapsing the throat of the mine. The fumes seep through the slats of the door, closing off the fire below. Smoke seeps through fissures in the wall, the rubble that clots our only lifeline out. And what concerns me is Amelia, my wife, working herself out of dreaming only to dress and adorn a nightmare she will forever wear. 2. Our wives and would-be wives huddle at headquarters some 17 miles from the Salt Dome, their heads turning to the radio I know is in the corner, its amber light unblinking, the mouth of the speaker mute of any updates. The women braille their anxiousness by tucking at the hem and sleeves of their cardigans and blouses, pushing their glasses in place, curling the strands of hair behind their ears, braille the buttons to make sure they are whole, to mirror and comprehend what the women read in each other's composure. Like ourselves, I know they are brailing the universal symbol when they steeple their hands beneath their chins or before their mouths moving from their request to the Almighty. Assurance restores my faith of our chance when I think of Barabbas, the most wretched of men, spared twice, the first from being on the cross. The second is one of only 2 survivors of a collapsed salt mine. Even that wretch surfaced from the hovel of a hell he was chained to. Surely, Lord, surely us 21 men outweigh one man who stole from us the one we need. 3. Dear Lord, I pray we all return to our homes, to clotheslines heavy with washed gray coveralls weighed with the promise of work weeks ahead, to sit at tables and neighbors' tables abundant with chicken and catfish, corn and okra, collards and ham hocks, cobblers and chilled beers or soda pops from the icebox. I pray to kiss Amelia's neck again, to take her into my mouth when we make love. The salt on her skin meant she worked at the wash tub, or harvested purple-hulled peas and summer squash, okras, and apples, the thick syrupy sweetness bursting at the seams of overripe figs, waiting to fall or to be plucked. I pray to hold my wife again during slumber, to hear her breathing dictated by dreaming, her heartbeat a faithful, reliable prayer in my palm. 4. Dear Lord, 5 of the men have gone off to strip themselves bare and cool themselves in the well. The oxygen thins and the monoxide makes wobbly our knees, makes light our delirium as we lower ourselves to the cave floor and prepare for prayer before sleep. We turn on our sides facing what we know to be east, curl up and tell ourselves it is okay to weep in front of the other men. Later, we will awake from an alarm, a rescue siren signaling success. With the aid of rescuers, they will help us to our feet, lead us through shafts. They worked and worried themselves through to find us. They will guide us to the familiar light. But unlike Barabbas, we will blink back the blinding light rather than shield our eyes. Daryl goes first. He does all this research, and I'm thinking I had to do that much research. But it was discovered that there were 21 men, and 15 or 16 of them were lying in fetal positions facing the entrance that was cut off. The other 5 or 6 men were found in a well naked. And they did not want to disclose that information to the wives. But it's up to us to interpret what they were doing. It could have been like some form of baptism, or the heat was getting to be too much that they went into the well. So that's my take on it. Okay, here we go. Now, I was born in Nha Trang, Vietnam during the war in 1968, and I came to America in 1972, and this is the Da Nang Children's Hospital, and the kid you see in the bed is a victim of a napalm raid. And I don't know if it's a boy or girl, I don't know. Yeah, so I picked boy, so, okay? So here we go, this is called a napalm lullaby, okay? It begins the same. We work the rice fields bordered by dikes and palms, and my son rests beneath the avenue of my trees, clustered with tiny yellow flowers leading out of the village. It alters for the most part. He hangs his morning catch on branches, silver-scaled fish swaying noiseless chimes. He climbs high in the tree to where the flower's fragrance reminds him of blue skies and damp green hills after monsoon seasons, and nestles in the bough, lulled by petals and leaves fanned by the breeze, and shivering rice stalks standing in shallow waters. He hums and gazes up at heaven through the yellow blooms when another hum drifts down to accompany him. He spots a gray bird in the distance. It ends the same. The gray bird glides toward him, steadying, leveling itself above the palm and my trees. From its bowels, it relieves waste. Large drops rain down upon land. The earth shakes, and fire grows from the ground to engulf the slim palms and my trees, which crackle, then collapse like felled crop. My boy climbs down, only to be crippled by feet rooted deep in black soil. The ever-looming bird drops and drops and drops until the my trees tremble, splintering yellow flowers from their shoots, sifting the air like dust disturbed by the sun. We hear my boy's screams meld with the trees afire. This song will forever stir us from our meals, from our sleep. Our thoughts are not our own, rather replaced by my son, charred and flaking, like the my trees behind him, until petals and ashes linger in the rice fields before drifting away. And we are left to adopt this new language of napalms and lullabies. Thank you very much for coming out.